Welcome to the Channel, a place where we explore intuition and how you can get the best use of it in your work and life. I'm your guest host, Sarah Biermann, and tonight I'm turning the camera around and I'm going to be interviewing Annabelle Drumm. Hello. Now you're on the other side.
Oh
you have to answer questions.
All right.
Good.
Let's hear your first
You're
question.
ready to go?
Ready.
All right. So I'd like to know when and how you first realized you had some intuitive skills or something that the other people around you
My weirdness.
didn't seem to have. Yeah. When did you figure out you were so weird?
When was I weird? Very early. Things like understanding animals at that stage. I could have conversations, two-way conversations with animals that were not words. So I guess it's telepathic, I guess. You don't really think about it. It just happens. And things used to pop out of my mouth that were rather embarrassing that I'm very sure I didn't actually think up. I'm a bright person. I know what's polite and what's suitable. And there were times where things would come out which I'd think afterwards, where did that come from? Even as I went into my early 20s, same thing. And some of them were completely shocking and horrifying. But I realize now they were basically a reflection back of whatever that person was thinking about themselves anyway. And it was just rather horrifying for anybody to point it out to them.
Can you give an example of how that might have happened?
Okay, let me think. There was a time when I was working with a guy who he'd been quite wide, and then he'd taken up running, and he got smaller. He was like half the width of what he was, and he was sitting there talking to me and telling me, "Oh, it's amazing, and I love running, and I run here and there all over the place. I can run for hours, and I love it." And I just immediately said, "What are you running away from?"
Ooh, yeah,
yeah, and he said, "What?" And I was like, oh, God, what have I done?
Oh, my God, I've got Asperger's. What's going
just
on here?
become. I said it again. What are you running away from? And he was like frozen in time. And then somebody else came into the room and broke the connection.
Wow.
And off he went. But he came back to me like a bit later and he said, that question I didn't want to answer, but my marriage is terrible and I can't stand being at home, and my wife's taken on a new religion and she's pushing it in my face all the time, and it's such a controlling thing, and I didn't want to be part of it, and it's breaking all our family up, and what kind of religion breaks up a family? And I was sitting there going, whoa, oh, okay. And so, but just the fact that he faced that, the elephant in the room basically, made a very big difference to his life. So, even it was one of those moments where it just fell out, and as I said, there've been plenty of times where things would fall out of my mouth and I go, I did not think of that. I don't know where it came from. I did not think of it. So as I moved into coaching, I mean, before that, I was running an agency for performing artists, which meant you were dealing with artistic temperaments of artists going out on jobs, but also dealing with clients that are just as temperamental and determined to make the very best event that they possibly can, or maybe it's a wedding, and so they're high stress, difficult to deal with. And I found again my intuition would lead me, and sometimes I'd say to myself, come on, let's find that what's the most gentle thing that we can offer them here? We're not here to slap anybody in the face when they've got a big event coming up. And sometimes the questions that came out were lovely. So I don't take credit for those questions. I think that's really important once you figure out that intuition comes from somewhere else, that you don't build your ego out like, yeah, baby, I know how to do this. You've got to just understand that they're coming from another place and they're always the right question.
Well, it's probably not coming from your human self, but I imagine that they're coming from an aspect of you that is quite wise.
Like the higher self, you think?
Sure. A good place.
They can see higher from that point, I think. I had...
right.
Yeah. I was doing some interviews with a channel once before who said sometimes you've got to look at it like, say you go into a cave, a dark cave, and you've got a torch. I think he meant a flame torch, like an old-fashioned torch. Hold it up in the air. What can you see? You get this cone of light around you, and that's as much as you can see. He says, I'm higher up. I'm in a higher spot. So when I hold my torch up, I can see much further than you. That's the only difference. I thought,
nice.
Yeah. So maybe a higher self is a bit like that. It's not like complete source that knows everything, but something that's a bit higher that can see a little wider and a little deeper.
That makes sense. It's sort of like if you're in the middle of a forest, you can see the trees immediately around you, but if you fly up, you can see the whole forest.
Yeah, that's it.
When you were really young, when you were a child, were you aware of this at a young age, or did you not become aware until you were older?
Well, I was very talkative, so I probably said all sorts of strange things that people were like, yes, dear, okay. Strange things coming out of my mouth. And lots of fantasies and imagination. I guess that's the creative side of a kid. People get used to that. But no, I probably wasn't very aware of it. But even when I got to school, I found that I got to that stage where, or maybe it's sort of inbuilt, that I would learn something and I'd immediately go and teach it. So first day of school, I was giving kids the guided tour of the school that I'd only just found out myself. This is where the toilets are. This is where you put your bag. Yeah. Since then, I've kind of learnt that not everything you learn is correct. So I do put a filter. I use the intuition now and go listen. And sometimes I'll be listening to very obscure things and go, does this ring true to me? And sometimes the weirdest things actually do make sense. And other things that you'd think would be quite regular and expected still don't ring true.
Did you find that when you get some information that you know your brain would never have thought of, you tend to trust it more? Those things that you say that just fall out of your mouth?
Yes.
Did you end up having to trust them more because you know you couldn't make them up?
Yeah, but I found also, because I have a very busy mind, that I would still fight against them sometimes. So even when the message would come through and say either, pursue this or leave it alone, and I'm like, do my own thing. So, of course, every time I fought against it would be the wrong choice, the wrong thing to do. Yeah, so I'm still learning that.
Yeah, that is one of the most important things, I think, that's learning. When you have some information, you have that higher view of that torch up a little higher. What do you say to people? So that's good. You mentioned imagination. Do you think it's important to have a really good imagination? Is that a part of intuition?
I don't know. I don't know if it's a part of it or if it's separate. To me, it feels like the imagination side is the co-creation skills, whereas the intuition is drawing in instructions, basically, or drawing in. That's what it feels like to me. So if I get an intuitive message, it's usually like an instruction, or it is saying this is truth, this is lies. Whereas the imagination side of things is, and you've got to know the difference, right? So if you're kind of going, does this guy like me? Don't really want to hear the answer.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if your intuition gives you an answer, whether you fight it or not, but if you imagine, oh, he must love me, that you can really mislead yourself. So you've got to know the difference between the two, and it's subtle. But you can tell. I think to me now, it feels like it's work for the brain. When you're doing imagination, you're creating stuff, or you're saying, okay, this is where I'm going for a bit. I'd quite like to head in this direction. And you embellish, and it's law of attraction stuff, right? You visualize it,
right,
and then you grow it each day, and it gets more and more fun and exciting, and juicy is the favorite word at the moment, to make it clearer in your mind so that the universe can head you in that direction if it's appropriate. But when it's intuition, then you just obey. That's what I was taught to do, obey, which sounds awful. Like, again, my fist went up the minute he said obey. But I understand that it's obeying your intuition. It's not obeying a man or a human or of any type or a parent.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would have a difficult time being willing to obey when your logical mind is saying, no, that doesn't make any sense. Don't go there. Did you have to develop that trust? Or
Yeah. So we probably have it as kids. You probably start off in the beginning of life and you trust it and you do what you're told. Whatever intuition says, you just go and do it, which is probably what makes you look strange. But and then we learn not to. We learn to follow teachers. We learn to obey teachers, obey parents, obey politicians, obey the police, and they don't necessarily know what is best for us in that particular moment. For example, say a child that's being molested at school or in a Boy Scouts or whatever, and their parent says, "You go and be good and do as you're told." You see what I mean? There's sometimes it's bad advice. It's not meant to be, but it is. It's like my parents demonstrated. I don't think they ever specifically said it to me, but demonstrating, be a dutiful wife. Be a dutiful wife. And so I stayed there far too long. Rather than listening into myself, which was screaming, "Come on, get out! It's over. It's finished."
There's the question. Yeah. So you had that voice talking to you for some time, but it took a while before you were willing to obey it because you had such strong childhood programming to be a dutiful wife.
Yeah. And I think when intuition doesn't take no for an answer, it will have... It's a bit like, if you get a cold. Now, this is another interesting thing I got told from a channeler. When you get a cold, the reason they cannot figure out what causes a cold is because it's nothing to do with the environment or your body or whatever. It's basically telling you to stop, slow down. Have more rest is what you need, or time to contemplate is what you need. That's why they can't figure out what causes it. And if you disobey it, if you take sort of cold rule or whatever and get back on, soldier on as they have on our advertisements anyway, then you'll get something worse, or you'll break your ankle, or you'll get the flu, something bigger, and the universe will scream louder and louder until you take notice.
I do remember reading at some point that often people who get really bad illnesses that take them down will be shocked because I've been healthy my whole life. So it's like, are they soldiering on and ignoring all of that stuff, and then it just builds up. And that's we're talking about as far as physical health. But how can you look at that buildup of like not listening to your intuition about other things and having a consequence of that?
I think you have to keep your sense of humor, I think, is the thing, because there's so many issues in life, whether it's money or relationships or whatever, that can get you so down, or job issues or whatever. You can get really, really low, and your intuition's going, woohoo, excuse me, hello, woohoo, hello, and it gets louder and louder to the point where it's so loud, screaming in your face that you have to laugh and go, okay, I get it, move on.
Yeah.
So I think the sooner you pick up on it and change direction and obey what is coming in, you save yourself a lot of discomfort.
That is a good tip. Have you others? Other tips for people? I'm thinking how they can develop it. If somebody's watching this and going, I don't think I really have that much intuition, or maybe a little, but I don't have confidence in it. What type of a exercise or whatever might you suggest to them to, work on developing that?
I've found something that's very useful is watching the news or watching videos without the sound on. Because when they put the sound on, there's a soundtrack that's kind of giving you instructions, that's trying to feed you a narrative. And sometimes it's straight up just a presenter saying, this is what's happening. And you'll go, oh, that's terrible. But if and other times it's just, they might drop in, which may not have been there in the first place, a scream, like a child's scream or a lady's scream or they can drop a different soundtrack in there that doesn't match what's actually going on. So if I turn off the sound and watch, I get a really clear picture of what's really going on. I think it's probably the visual, the body language, not just body language, but tuning in. So you can see with famous people, for example, politicians and celebrities and stuff, if you watch them, or even things like, I I was watching something on Facebook of what looks like a white policeman beating up a black homeless woman on the floor of a convenience store, and it looked outrageous.
Yeah.
It looked outrageous, like racism, and it's dreadful, all this kind of stuff. But when I turned the sound off, it was like a very different story of what was going on and what she had been up to before that. And, he really had to get her to stop what she was doing because she was harming a lot of people. You see, so you get a very different message.
So how did you, if you're looking at one of the talking heads talking about the news or showing the videos, whatever, and you're not hearing it, how do you actually, how does it work for you that you get that information that you need? Can you kind of give us a little more pinpoint? Where do you feel it? Do you see it? Do you smell it?
Probably all of those. I've picked up on all of those. So they're meant to be your clair skills, aren't they? Clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience. I haven't refined in any of them in particular, but I can pick up on each of them. And I think that the most important thing is to empty your brain. Don't try and figure it out, because that's your brain working, and then it's so loud that you can't hear your instructions anymore. So you've got to kind of be a zombie, which is sort of, I always think it's funny when I explain this to people, because people go, well, here's the blonde telling you not to think. Right? But it's true.
Easy for you, right?
If you sit there...
brunettes have a hard time.
I know, hard time stopping thinking.
Yes. Oh, yeah,
so
I totally relate to that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
No, just being anybody can learn, whether they're using meditation. I'm not great at meditation, but to find something, isn't that interesting? Some people, it works brilliantly well. They get all their messages that way. They get entire lessons and conversations with higher beings or whatever. Fine.
Right.
But for me, I just taking a particular activity, like watching a video with the sound off, and having no judgment, no preconceived ideas. I don't know who this person is. I know the media's told me all this stuff about that person, so I think I know them, but really I don't. I don't. I've never actually sat down with this person and had a chat, so I'm not going to judge them at all from all those stories I've seen before. I'm just going to sit here. Here's a bloke and here's a woman, and they're conversing, and then, what's going on? What do I pick up? And without any judgment. I think that's one of the best things you can start with.
That makes me think of when you're looking at it and you're going, what can I pick up? It's almost like adding your imagination in there, because you need to be able to imagine what you can pick up. You be able to think that there is something you can pick up, which the logical brain is going to tell you that, just watching the picture is not going to give you the information. So is it like, the imagination that is like, well, there might be something else?
Yeah, you don't, because you don't want to go picking up things that are not there. I mean, I often see that too. There are lots of groups on Facebook that look for conspiracies, for example. And sometimes, honestly, they look at things and they can, if they looked at the face of Jesus, they'd find a pimple. Honestly, they just... You look at them and you're like, what are you doing? Are you looking for the worst possible outcome here? So you have to be careful of adding in imagination. I try to leave it out completely.
Interesting.
You're better to be the zombie, just empty, no beliefs.
Emotionally neutral.
Don't know this person. Sometimes you're looking at someone who you think you do know. You might have known them for years, and suddenly you realize they're a totally different person. That can happen too.
Interesting.
You've got to be able to observe.
Good one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else you would like to add, to share, either tips or what people would like to know about you? What you'd like people to know about you? No? Well, here I am. This is me. That's it.
Here's me in progress. I'm a work in progress. I would love, and the whole reason I'm doing the channel is because I'm fascinated by how different people use their intuition. And I haven't gotten... I'm not going to say those words. I'm still remembering how to open my channel, right? So that I can hear those instructions on a more flowing basis. I would love that. And so I think this is why I've set up the channel, because I want to understand how that works for each person. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also a really important topic to discuss in these volatile times, because when you're seeing somebody on Facebook going off on something and, doing some drama, or whether it's the news doing their version of the drama, it's really important to be able to have that part of you that goes, yeah, that's not true. That's not.
It's so important. Yeah. Because people are still very easily led like sheep. That's it. They'll follow whatever narrative they're given, and the people that have the power to broadcast that material out, they know that. So the more that we can get people to tune in, the more of them will see what's really going on, and then they won't be able to fool us anymore.
There we go. So forget everything you learned in school. Sit still and listen to the teacher and just absorb what they're sending to you. Use your discernment, use your intuition, and we can change the world.
Yay!
All right. One intuitive at a time. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you for being my guest host.
You're welcome.